The losing streak is finally over. Winning matters. Losing also matters. Let's talk about the NBA draft.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. I am James Ham, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320, the Kings Beat, and host of Locked On Kings. Covered the Sacramento Kings for the last 16 years as a credentialed media member, also a member of the Pro Basketball Writers Association. Locked On Kings is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We've got a busy show today. The Sacramento Kings, of course, won and snapped their 16-game losing streak yesterday. So now what's next? And to be honest with you, what's next is we got to start talking about the NBA draft, and mainly because these players are playing all the time. And so today's roadmap, basically, we're going to talk about some tiers for this year's NBA draft. There's already tiers developing within the top 6, 7, 8 picks of this draft. Also, who fits with the Kings and who doesn't. And lastly, we'll talk about the nuts and the bolts of the draft. When is it? Where is it? How is this whole thing going to play out? So first and foremost, I do like to do NBA draft tiers. Look, when I worked at NBC for years, I did NBA mock drafts, tons of NBA mock drafts, including, I think it was 23 during the 2020 pandemic, where I just had to keep writing more and more and more, which is why I know a whole lot about Tyrese Haliburton and, of course, Killian Hayes, who just signed a 10-day contract with the Kings yesterday. But this year's draft in particular, I think is very interesting. There is a 1 of 1 at the top end of the draft. And it doesn't matter like how I rate prospects or anything else. I think it's a foregone conclusion at this point. There is some movement that could happen here, but there is a growing sort of understanding that there is a legitimate top #1 pick in this year's draft, and that's Darryn Peterson out of Kansas. Is 6'5" combo guard. Realistically, he's just a guy you hand the ball to, and he becomes a focal point of your team. And I think everybody kind of understands that that's where this is heading. Now, it's possible that he does slide down draft boards, and a lot of that is self-induced, to be honest with you. He's missed quite a few games due to injury, cramping, and an ankle injury. But on top of that, you can see him pull himself out of the game. And I think that there's going to be some major questions about, sort of how that translates to the next level, especially how that translates to the next level when you might go to a bad team. And, will Darryn Peterson and his people pull him out of games, or will he push him to go to certain teams, or, one team over another team? I think a lot of that is in play, and we're going to have to wait and see how it plays out, but it's not a good way to walk into your freshman year and already have this as like a major question mark about who you are as a player. It doesn't matter. For me, he's still, take all the concerns, put him aside. He's still the legitimate #1 pick in this year's draft, a 6'5" guard, Kansas, absolutely tremendous talent. Now, I think where we're starting to see some separation is tier 1 is just Darryn Peterson for me. And that's because I do think he's going to be one of those players who is going #1 overall, regardless of who's drafting there. The second pick in the draft, I also put in a tier by himself, and that is AJ Dybantsa. Dybantsa, it's out of BYU. He's a 6'9" combo forward. He can play both the 3 and the 4. He can actually play a lot more than the 3 and the 4. It feels like he too is a guy that you might want to give the ball to and get out of the way and let him develop into whatever player he's going to become. But as of right now, we're seeing him take off. He reminds me of like the next generation of Pascal Siakam. A lot of spin moves, a lot of activity, a lot of physicality within his play, and length, athleticism, all that stuff. I'm just talking about the next generation of Pascal Siakam. And so for me, this is, a tier by himself. Dybantsa, over his last 9 games, is averaging 29.8 points per game, 6.4 rebounds, 4.8 assists, 51.4% from the field, 42.9% from 3 on 5 attempts per game. He's also getting to the free throw line 9.3 times per game. He is so physical. He's so athletic. He's got handles. I think he's an absolute dream and something that the Sacramento Kings would be definitely interested in. He's also a player that showed up with his dad to a game when the Utah Jazz played the Sacramento Kings like a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and was actually there. And the Kings got to talk to him. And, someone like Mark Jones got to talk to him. We talked about it here on this podcast last week. So AJ Dybantsa is tier 2. Now, I know this is getting a little strange because my tiers are very small, but the next tier is also one player. And so I do think that this draft, it's very, there's a high likelihood it will go 1, 2, 3. And the number 3 pick to me is Cam Boozer. Of course, it's Carlos Boozer's son. We're talking about a big time bruiser. And, right now at Duke, he's, again, a 6'8", 6'9" power forward / center. He's such a winner. He won at the high school level. He's got Duke number 1 in the country right now. They'll be a number 1 seed in the tournament. And we're talking about a crazy refined big man that right now is averaging 22.6 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists, shooting 58.2% from the field and 39.6% from the 3. Slightly concerned about his translation to the NBA game, but I may have had those concerns about, some of the other players that have come through and, an Alperen Şengün. And lo and behold, he figured it out and he's, a perfectly great young player. So I think Boozer will do the same thing. I just do worry about sort of the speed of the game and he's just kind of a big lumbering dude. So we'll have to see how it goes. Then we get to tier number 4. Now, look, here is where things go crazy. I do think that there is a 4th tier. As of right now, I think it's a 2-man tier, but I'm going to expand it out to be a 4-man tier at this point. Caleb Wilson, a 6'9" forward out of North Carolina. He just makes a ton of sense for the modern NBA. 19.8 points, 9.4 rebounds, 2.7 assists, also 1.5 steals and 1.4 blocks per game. So we're talking about a legitimate sort of 5-tool player at one of the forward positions. Right now, he's probably a small forward, but as time goes on, he's certainly going to be switchable. And then once we get past Caleb Wilson, we have this really interesting thing happening where 3 point guards have kind of separated themselves. And that's Kingston Fleming's out of Houston. It's Darius Acuff out of Arkansas and Michael Brown out of Louisville. Now, I think all 3 of these guards are going to be really good at the NBA level. My personal choice is Kingston Fleming's out of Houston, 6'3" / 6'4", really good 2-way guard. He's not going to score a ton of points like every single night. But what we're seeing right now is he's a little under 20 points per game. Assist numbers are good, but he plays defense. He plays with speed and quickness. He's drawn some comparisons to De'Aaron Fox. And it's one of those things that the reason what I think separates him a little bit from me is that he has a crazy motor and he doesn't shut off. And so when you're looking at a player who goes up against Darryn Peterson in this big game, sure, Kansas rolled over, Fleming's team. He ran over the Houston's team, but he held Peterson to like 5 of 16 shooting. And this is just, like a really high quality point guard prospect. And I think he's going to go anywhere between 4 and 7 in the draft. But then we get into some of the other guys. We've got Acuff, who again, point guard out of Arkansas, he's right around 6'3", 6'2", 6'3", but he's averaging 22.2 points, 6.2 assists, shooting over 50% from the field and 44% from 3. Absolutely dynamic scorer, super dynamic scorer. And I could see him being a really good fit for the Sacramento Kings. And then the last one in this tier is Michael Brown. And again, point guard out of Louisville, 6'5", kind of moves like Halliburton, but a very different game. You'll watch him and you'll be like, oh, yep, I see the movement of him. He looks a little bit like Halliburton as he moves through the court. But 19 points, 5 assists, 42% from the field, 36% from three. Not as refined a scorer as Acuff, and probably not as good defensively as Fleming, but still a top tier prospect. And so, kind of interesting. Those are the tiers. We're going to get deeper into this in just a sec. But before we do, let's take a break and talk to our sponsors. Ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into a reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right. Flights, tickets, the whole experience. If you're already looking at the big board and thinking about which team can make a deep run, this is a perfect time to lock in. Futures are really cool. Whether it's picking a team to win the championship or grab a conference title, it adds that extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. And now, not only can you pick up some cash, but you could also win a trip to the NBA Finals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost for an NBA futures and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right. Thank you for making Locked On Kings your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you haven't already, go check out our Everydayer Club. You get access to an ad-free version of this show of Locked On Kings. It's compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcast. Also, you get an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayers Club Discord server, which includes a group chat for listeners of this show. Go into the description, click the Everydayer Club, or go to lockedonkings.supercast.com. Okay, so we see that there's tiers. Maybe my tiers are different than your tiers. Maybe you've got 2 tiers and it's a top 3 and then it's 4 players or it's 5 players. But the way I look at the draft is a little bit different. And that's kind of how I broke this down so far. Things can change. We're still in February. There's still plenty of time for these guys to move up and down the board. If anything, right now, AJ Dybantsa is showing out and looks more and more and more like an elite #1 overall prospect. He might be the belly buster of this entire thing. But the reason I kind of circle this group is kind of twofold. Number one, we can get into sort of the needs of the Sacramento Kings. And I think the one thing about the Kings roster is there's versatility. So whatever's left of the Kings roster after this next season or two, that's what we're talking about. And so I'm not going to get too heavy into like, look, if the Kings were to land, the #1 overall pick, they're not going to not draft Darryn Peterson because they have Zach LaVine on their roster. That's not happening. Or because they have Russell Westbrook, who just finished up a 1-season deal and may or may not resign. Or they have Malik Monk, who can play some point guard. Again, Neat Clifford will matter a little bit, but not when it comes to who you're drafting in the top 10. That's not going to matter at all. You might not take another shooting guard with your early second-round picks because you have Neat Clifford, but then again, maybe you do because you feel like you need depth at that position anyways. So here's how I kind of look at the Kings roster and how I kind of match it up to the group of players that are available. First and foremost, Keegan Murray is one guy that is under contract for the next 5 years after this season and is going to be part of the Kings roster. He signed a 5-year, $140 million deal. The cool thing about Keegan Murray is he can play the 3 or the 4. So what that does is it opens up the door for him to play alongside Cam Boozer as a 3 with Cam Boozer at the 4, or him to play alongside an AJ Dybantsa with him as, either the 3 or the 4. Same thing with Caleb Wilson. So there is versatility in the one player that you do know that you're building around, and that's Keegan Murray. I don't think the Kings would make a decision on who they're drafting just because they have Keegan Murray one way or another. But the fact is that his versatility as a player helps, right? The next thing I think, when you're looking at the Kings, Neat Clifford's ability to play the 1, the 2, the 3 it actually helps as well. So you can hopefully down the road be able to move him around a little bit, or again, find a location for him that makes sense. And that would open the door for you to maybe chase a point guard in this year's draft. I'd say the only position that the Kings really have like an overabundance of, that is a center position where they've got Max Reno and they've got Dylan Cardwell. But oh, by the way, you also have a multi-time All-Star, multi-time All-NBA player in Domantas Sabonis who plays that position. So the one good thing about the Sacramento Kings and this specific draft is that the first center projected to come off the board is right around like between 19 and 22 in the draft, where the Kings are not going to be drafting unless they add a second pick. And even then, they still have flexibility with who they would draft at that spot. I don't think the Kings are going to look at a big man in this year's draft, especially with the glut that they have already at the position. But again, if you look at if you look at Cam Boozer and say, okay, is he a one? Is he a 4, or is he a 5? Is he a 4-5 combo? That still would work for the Kings. They still have plenty of players that this would actually work for. So I'm definitely not super concerned about that particular position. So look, if the Kings land the number 1 overall pick, like Darryn Peterson makes a ton of sense. They need a legitimate number 1 option, a guy who literally has superstar potential. He gets compared all the time to Kobe Bryant for his work ethic, but realistically, he's such a refined prospect that you're looking at like a 19-year-old kid that already gets it as far as the play. Now, there are other concerns about him, about him not playing and the injuries and sort of this group of people that are behind the scenes with him. But I don't think that would deter the Kings at all. I also look at AJ Dybantsa. AJ Dybantsa is a spot on legitimate, like, stud. This is a star level player, an all-star level player, potentially. That's always the word we have to use when we're talking about draft prospects. But he also fits with the Kings with what they're doing. It would be really nice to have a pair of forwards that you're moving forward with for the next 5 years in Keegan Murray and a guy like AJ Dybantsa. I think Dybantsa, again, Keegan Murray would take some of the defensive liability off of him early in his career and allow Dybantsa to step on the court and average, probably 17 or 18 points a game as a rookie. This is an absolute top tier scoring prospect. Again, leading the nation in scoring right now. So really, really impressive player. Number 3, the Cam Boozer of it all. I like the idea of Max Reno, Dylan Cardwell, Cam Boozer, front line with Keegan Murray at the 3. So Cardwell and Reno playing alongside Boozer. Again, a bigger, stronger player. I would actually be really intrigued to watch him and Dylan Cardwell play together. I think that would be a ton of fun to watch. And so again, I'm kind of intrigued by that. But then when we get past that, that's where all of these point guards come into play. And I really like this point guard class. I think that there is a ton of options for the Kings here with this group. Again, Kingston Fleming is my first choice, but one of the things the Kings have to do is if they don't land the top pick or the number 2 pick, they really have to start looking at how are they going to get a top 15 point guard. They thought that they were going to have the point guard position at least with a temporary fix with Dennis Schroeder, but he got traded. So now you're looking at this group, whether it's Fleming or Acuff or Michael Brown. And I think, again, to kind of point to why this matters and why this is exciting, it should be exciting for Kings fans, is that you might be able to get not only a player that you really like, but a player that you like at a position of need. And so, again, I'm not someone who chooses, when you're drafting this high in the draft, you're not going to choose, you're going to go with best player available, not with fit. But either way, I think that there's some nice flexibility here for the Kings, and hopefully they land one of these guys. All right, we're going to step aside, and when we come back, we're going to talk some of the nuts and bolts of the draft season about what is about to happen here. Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadline stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill is sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed sponsored jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for: skills, expertise, location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all of the boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Spend less time searching, more time actually interviewing candidates, less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners to this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves on Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. All right. So we've gone over quite a few things already, sort of who I would look at if I were the Sacramento Kings drafting at the top end of the draft. Not only that, but sort of, where the Kings should look to go. And I think it's really interesting when we're talking about this year's draft, because, the Kings are one of the worst teams in the NBA. And, like, actually they are the worst team in the NBA at this point. So when winning matters, losing also matters. And so what I look at when we're talking about all of this is, like, just what does a win mean against the Kings, for the Kings? And, like, look, they have the worst record at 13-46 in the league. The Pacers and Nets each have 15 wins, 16 wins for the Pelicans and the Wizards. The Jazz have 18. So that's your group of teams. I don't personally think the Kings will get to 18 wins on the season. So I'm just going to wipe out the Jazz, right? I also don't think, again, if you're looking at teams with 16 wins, the Pelicans and Wizards, like, all they have to do is win 2 or 3 games, and I think they're out of reach of the Kings. And we're talking 2 or 3 games in the final 23 or 24 of the season. So I do think this will come down to the Pacers and Nets. The Pacers are already on notice from the league for tanking. They've already been fined once. They've got to watch their P's and Q's. The Nets have 15 wins. I think that they're also going to be sort of in the mix for the number 1 seed going into the draft lottery. So some of the nuts and bolts. Like, first of all, start scoreboard watching with the Pacers, the Nets, the Pelicans, the Wizards, right? The Kings do play, I think, all of these teams again down the stretch. Maybe the Wizards is the one team they don't play that's left on that schedule. But the NBA draft lottery is May 10th. The combine starts right afterwards. It's in Chicago, like always, from May 10th to May 17th. The draft itself is June 24th for the first round and the 25th for the second round. And here's sort of how the lottery odds break down today. Right now, the lowest the Kings could draft is 5th. That would be a catastrophic thing to happen as well. That would mean that 4 teams moved above you and took the top pick. And so the worst team in the NBA, the worst pick they can have in the draft is number 5. Now, it has happened, and to be honest with you, it happened to the Kings a bunch when it used to be only the top 3 teams were taken. So if you go back to, I think it's the '09 NBA draft when they drafted Tyreek Evans with the 4th overall pick. The Kings were the worst team, jump ahead of them again. And so, again, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, the Kings drafted number 5, where they took DeMarcus Cousins. So the draft lottery, it's not, they've changed a lot of the odds at this point. So right now, the top 3 teams or the bottom 3 teams in the lottery all have a 14% chance. So 14, 14, 14 to land the number 1 overall pick. The next team, the 4th worst team in the league, has a 12.5% chance. The next team, the 5th overall worst team in the league, has a 10.5%. And then we drop to 9%. So if you are the worst team in the league, you have a 52.9% chance of landing in the top 4 and a 47.1% chance of landing with the number 5 overall pick. So your odds are still slightly better that you'll land in the top 4 than that you would draft at number 5. But also the good thing about being, if you are the worst team in the NBA, you don't have to actually worry about dropping below that. So we don't have odds for the number 6 pick because that's not something that actually happens. You can't drop to number 6. So again, I want to start out with draft primer. Like, we're just going to start talking about players in like a global sense. We're going to do some tiers and stuff like that as we have off days leading up to the end of the season. Once we get to the end of the season, we're really going to dive into draft prospects. It's something that I love to do. I've done it for years. I've studied the NBA draft since I think 1997 or 98 when Zydrunas Ilgauskas, that was my guy that year, and he fell to the second round and was an absolute steal, had a wonderful career. But I've studied the draft forever, and I really enjoy the process of learning about the prospects. And we'll kind of go through this together. You know, when there are big games coming up, I'm going to start alerting you to make sure that you're tuning in, make sure you're setting your DVR to, you know, you should at this point just set it to hit the little plus button on your YouTube TV and say, hey, every single time BYU is playing, every single time Kansas is playing, North Carolina, you know, some of these teams, Houston, whenever they're playing, have the plus button, Duke. So you can start getting a better feel for who some of these players are, and maybe you formulate some ideas on what they look like to you. And, you know, like I can give you some sort of historical reference points for some of these players. But again, we don't know what any player is going to look like until they get into the league. And then you have to judge them on their play once they're actually in the league. It's not an easy transition. And some of these players won't transition well at all. Of the top 7, there's probably going to be 2 or 3 guys who never really amount to anything more than possibly a rotational player. And sometimes guys that are just out of the league. We're seeing it right now with the Kings bringing in Killian Hayes on a 10-day contract. That was the number 7 pick in the draft. And there are players all over the place. Josh Jackson was the 4th pick in the draft before De'Aaron Fox. Markelle Fultz was the 1st pick in that draft. Both of those guys are out of the league. De'Aaron Fox is still having a great time. Jason Tatum still playing great basketball. Lonzo Ball, the number 2 pick, he's hit and miss. Injuries have wiped his career, most of his career out. So again, the draft is a crapshoot, but the more you know, the more you're watching prospects, the more you're kind of getting a feel for them, the more you're going to actually be able to, you know, get excited about some of these guys, because I think there is a ton of talent at the top end of this draft. And actually, I think that there's a bunch of players all the way up and down the board that are going to be really high quality players. It's just a matter of getting a little lucky. And, you know, it would help if the Kings had 2 first-round picks, especially 2 top 7 picks. That would be amazing, because then they could get a point guard and they could get one of these forwards that people are drooling over. But that's not going to happen. The chance of the Kings landing another top 10 pick, nearly impossible, and it would probably cost you Keegan Murray and more. So for right now, we're just going to center on 1 pick and what does that look like, and we'll try to, you know, sort of bring some of these guys to light so you have a better idea who they are as we get closer to the draft. All right, thanks for tuning in to today's Locked On Kings podcast. Make sure to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the little notification button so it dings you every single time you that we go live and you know what's happening. Also, give us a follow on all the social media accounts. And lastly, check out the Everydayers Club. If you never miss an episode, it's time to make it official. Join the Locked On Everydayers Club and get ad-free audio access to our members-only Discord and more, all built for our most loyal fans. Click the link below or go to lockedonkings.supercast to become a member. We'll see you tomorrow.